Hi, I'm Heather from Philadelphia. You're listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, the podcast where two Midwestern moms talk progressive politics and political activism with candidates, authors, activists, artists, and more.
Hi, everyone. This is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and I'm here today with Debrianna Mansini, who is an actor and an activist, or as she likes to say, an activist. So, hello, Debrianna.
Hi. So happy to be with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So maybe just to situate the conversation a little bit, could you tell us a little bit about your acting career, what sorts of work you've done, and how you started out?
Sure. I started out in New York. I'm an East Coast girl. That's where I grew up on the East Coast. And so I trained in New York and some in LA, mostly with folks from the Actors Studio. I went to Circle in the Square and worked there for a while. And then I became enchanted with New Mexico. I came to Santa Fe on vacation, and then I decided I should never leave. So I've been very fortunate, though. I've had a lovely career from here and went back and forth to work in New York and LA for many years. And I've had really lovely time being able to be an actor and be in Santa Fe, a beautiful place to live, and done a lot of TV and films. The last film I was in was Hell or High Water with Jeff Bridges. I also did Crazy Heart with him. And I'm a reoccurring role on Better Call Saul, and I moved over from Breaking Bad. So I think I'm one of the few actors that actually did move over from that show who lives here. So yeah, I've worked a bunch and still am. Been lucky to have a theater career from here too. And right now my solo show is touring, the Meatball Chronicles. So that's kind of where my activism is plugging in.
All right. And have you always been an activist? Is this something that's been part of your life and your career for a while, or is this something new?
No, it's not new. I've always been very engaged in politics, is what I should say. Since I was a kid, I've always paid attention to what's been happening in the world. I don't know why that happened. It didn't come from my family. I think it just came from me. So I've always been paying attention. I voted from the minute I could. The first thing I ever voted on was the liquor law when I was in college. But I've always voted and understood the importance of voting, and so have been active, protesting, doing all that kind of stuff through my entire adult life. So it's not new for me by any stretch. It's certainly amped up in the last little while, but I was engaged, pretty amped up watching what was happening probably from Reagan on. I could see that the problems that we're having now could happen with all of the way things were deregulating and the focus on money being the only way that we value things in life. Even when I was working in New York, I never liked going in the Trump building when it was first put up. So that value system of money being the way we associate whether something is good or not, or valuable or not, has always been a red flag for me. And so I could see it coming from back then all the way to now. And what's happening now was a process that started then, in my opinion. I mean, I grew up in a school system that was a public school. That in our public school, we had high taxes in our town, but that went toward public schools. So my public school had a planetarium. We had a field hockey field, a football field, a practice football field, photography rooms, computer rooms. We had home economics rooms that were all set up. Kids could study auto mechanics in my public school. So when they started cutting back little by little by little, where we are now with teachers is rock bottom, but it was headed that way. We should have been in the streets then when they said we didn't need to pay teachers as much, or we could cut our taxes and cut what was going to public schools. Where we are now, to me, is a direct line from where we started. That's, I think, why I've always been engaged, because I could see where it could end up if we didn't speak out.
So there are a lot of actors and artists now who are pretty politically engaged in 2018. Is that something you've seen going back, or do you think that that's a fairly new development?
Oh, no, it's pretty new. A lot of people told me I should keep my mouth shut if I was an actor, that my political views shouldn't be forward. I mean, I was being told that as recently as probably 5 years ago. I don't remember when I started on Twitter, but I was like, yeah, no, this is who I am, and I am going to be who I am. And if that means that some people aren't going to like my views, then you know what? You can't please everybody all the time. And I have a life, and this life is important. And if I'm going to be able to garner attention, then I'm going to use that opportunity to raise my voice about things that are important. You know, it was funny when I started acting, I recognized, way back in the Greek times, acting and public showings were a way of storytelling and a way of showing ways that human beings are, ways that human beings could be. And it was like, I don't want to be woo-woo about it, but it was a healing thing. And that's always the way I've viewed it, is as a way to storytell and show us, reflect back to us who we are and how we can be better at who we are. So that's always been my drive. I think it's why I didn't care when I moved to New Mexico. I knew I would carry my artistry wherever I went. I wanted to be where I could be the most effective as a human being. And New York wasn't making me happy then. It all becomes part of the package of who I am. So my activism voice is part of who I am, and I can't separate who I am from my craft, which is all I have. It's my instrument, is who I bring to the world. So I have to have access to all those parts of me.
And what are the political issues that you're particularly passionate about? I mean, there's so much going on right now that people can get care so much about. Yeah. But what are the ones that really drive you?
Well, the one that I'm speaking about that has a relationship to the show I'm working with now, my solo show, is really about food and family. And food issues have always been a part of who I am as an activist. I really stand behind organic food, and that food should be clean and not contaminated, and that those are basic things that we should be able to offer each other in the world. And so I actually created a web series early on about the dangers of what was happening to the bees and our food system, called Ciphers, about 7 years ago when web series were first coming out. So food has always been an issue for me. So my show right now is aimed at raising awareness about ending lunch shaming, because that New Mexico was the first state to end that practice, but it's still a nationwide problem. Kids should be able to eat. Poor kids. My family grew up on food stamps assistance sometimes, not all the time, but we had it when we needed it. And I just think shaming people about being hungry is just ridiculous. So that was something that really caught my attention now. But food issues have always been at the forefront of a lot of my attention, for sure. Also voting, I have to say, I've always been personally very upset by the fact that felons can't vote after they've served their time. Once you've paid the price for whatever atrocity you may have committed or law breaking you've committed, you come back into society and you are affected by laws. Frankly, I don't see why anyone can't vote, even if they're in jail. You're still a citizen of this country. But if you're going to take them away from people when they come back out, the lawmakers affect people, human beings. We should always be able to vote. So that's always been a big passion of mine.
Everything around voting and elections, I'm learning more and more, especially as we're doing this podcast, that things are so differentiated by state. And so right now in Florida, they're trying to decide whether to reinstate voting rights for felons. There are some states where felons either have rights immediately or can petition to get them back, and then a lot of places where they don't. And it's very strange to me that this is a state issue. And that
Me too.
your right about whether you can vote or not would be up to the state and not up to the country when it includes federal elections.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. I think it's horrific that anybody should be denied their right to vote. But you're affected by the lawmakers. Why are you disempowering people? These are our lawmakers. So the only thing it looks like to me always is voter suppression. And I don't understand it. If our prison system is a way to say this is your punishment, do you need to be continually punished when you leave? Or is there some kind of rectification that happens because you went to prison? So that's a huge issue for me. I think it's wrong. So I always speak out about that when I can. The thing is, it's not a national, like you said, not a national issue. It's a state by state issue.
So let's go back to lunch shaming for a minute. If for people who don't know what this is, can you describe a little bit more what is lunch shaming and what did the New Mexico law do?
Lunch shaming is when kids are on a reduced fee lunch program and their parents, for whatever reason, have not been current on paying the bill to be on that lunch program, that they get shamed when the parents owe money. So if the kid goes to have lunch, in some states they stamp on them, I need lunch money, in punishment, or they'll throw out their hot lunch in front of them and hand to the child a piece of cheese, or they do any number of things. And again, it varies, probably state by state to some extent, but it's just a way of shaming a child if their parent can't pay the bill or hasn't paid the bill for whatever reason. To me, the reason doesn't matter. If a kid is hungry, they should eat. They just oh my God, it's so offensive to me. So that's what it is. New Mexico Appleseed is a nonpartisan organization in New Mexico that helped write the bill that ended it here. Our House Representative, Michelle Grisham, who's running for governor in our state, is carrying the bill in the House, and I believe my Senator Tom Udall is carrying it in the Senate to try and end it on a nationwide basis, that kids should not be punished for not being able to afford food or their parents not paying the bill.
Yeah, I have two little kids who go to school, and I can't even imagine going through something like that, how terrible that has to be for kids.
Yeah, it's just kids have to deal with enough, and being hungry isn't helping anybody. Everyone knows what it's like to be hungry and how you can't focus and how awful it makes you feel. Why would you do that to kids who are supposed to be in a learning environment? It's so appalling to me. So I decided it appalled me from the moment I read about it, and I went, well, I can only do what I can do. My state's cleared it up, but I can raise awareness as I travel around doing a show that's largely about food, family, and what food teaches us and brings to us and gives to us. Then how could I not talk about that? So that's what I'm doing.
All right. And so your show is called The Meatball Chronicles.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expand a little bit on what the show is like, what kind of experience people have when they come?
Yeah. Well, when I first got the idea, I thought, because I'm always cooking, I come from a big Italian family and we all cook. And I felt like everything I ever learned in life, I learned around a meal. And so I thought, well, this would be interesting if I could write a show where I cook on stage. And so I just started writing stories. And the show, as it took shape, I realized that cooking on stage is a logistical nightmare if I really wanted to perform it outside of the one theater that I might start it out in. So I abandoned that idea and largely just kept writing the show. And the show it's kind of a love story, but it's a love story that has many facets. It's my own love affair with making food and the joy and the heartbreak sometimes that I've experienced around doing that. And it's stories of my family and how I found my own love through one night when I was making dinner for my boyfriend, who ended up becoming my husband, and what that experience brought to me. And so even though it's about my Italian heritage, I've written it in a way, I hope, that it seems to expand across boundaries of, if you come from a culture that, and most cultures do have have food relationships. Latino culture has a relationship with their style of cooking. Asians do. And